Yo, my friend. Hello, hello, and welcome to a special episode of the Pixelists podcast. That's Blake.
Ooh.
I'm Will. How you doing today, man?
Doing well. Although we're recording this episode, this is like a future episode.
Oh,
It's like we've been in the Feywild because no,
oh,
we've been doing some episodes, but this is the first time we've recorded an episode and then realized the old recording button had done us dirty. So this is take two
take two.
of this video, and I hope everyone who's watching enjoyed some delicious turkey. If you celebrate Thanksgiving, and we're putting this episode out since there's no Critical Role this week, we put this one out to talk about what happened in EXU. So I'm excited for today's episode. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. Hopefully this the second run through is even better than the one we lost. We didn't film like
Never
the whole
know.
episode or anything, but we were about like 5 or 6 minutes in. So
We were like 8 or 9 hours into this deep dive on EXU, and
we were having some great revelations.
yeah, we were doing quantum physics. It was really amazing, actually. But
But
no,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say I'm doing great, and I'm excited to talk to you about this. And I apologize for making us do it twice.
No, it's all good. It's the journey. Anyone who's watching, who you produce your own content, your own videos, the struggle of just this kind of stuff happening. But the whole reason we're doing this video is because we are a handful of episodes into Critical Role Campaign 3. We're absolutely loving it. But there's been this really important detail, which is that 3 characters of the party are characters from EXU, this sort of seasonal type of content that ran for 8 episodes over the summer. And some of our people who are watching, who comment in the channel on our videos, which, hey, by the way, we appreciate that. Thanks for watching us. People have asked, okay, so what's the backstory there? I didn't watch EXU. We've had some people who said, hey, I watched like an episode or 2, but I just couldn't really get into it. And so ultimately, we wanted to make this video for people who love D&D, but didn't necessarily have the time or just have not yet watched through EXU. Kind of give you the nuts and bolts
Yeah,
of what you need to know about EXU to continue to enjoy Campaign 3.
yeah,
So,
exactly. The cheat sheet, and so you can maybe also pick up on some of the inside jokes that have been thrown around because there already has been a handful of them, even just 4 episodes in.
right.
Um, but yeah, I guess without further ado, we'll just go ahead and jump into this. I'm gonna start with a quick recap of the entirety of EXU. We're gonna try to do it in like 4 or 5 minutes, just to give you the grand painting. But if you are
Right.
interested in a more in-depth recap, Blake and I actually did a recap for each episode of EXU back when they were airing, and those. I mean, obviously, it doesn't hit every detail, but those are going to be way more in depth. So if you're interested in that,
Sure.
you can find it on the channel. Um, but yeah, all right, let's just jump into it. So, Exandria Unlimited. Uh, this whole story is about a group of adventurers, which I'll go ahead and just outline that here. We have a halfling fighter named Orym, a fawn druid named Fearne, an air genasi named Dorian, who is a bard, and
Mhm.
a dwarven sorcerer named Dariax, and finally a human warlock named Opal. So the story starts with this group of people basically all hungover and recovering from a night of festivities. Um, and so they kind of get up, get some food, and the first thing that happens is they notice this really shady person, who we come to find out is named Posca, kind of messing around their house. So they get to talking to her, and they find out that she is a member of this seedy underground organization called the Nameless Ones, who are kind of vying for power in this area.
And
And
they're in the city of Iman, by the
Iman,
way.
yes, thank you.
We forgot to mention that detail.
And Posca's like, hey, you know what? I could maybe have work for you guys. I'm pretty connected. And they're like, okay, maybe. And she's like, all right, but you have to prove yourself. So she tasks them with going to steal something and coming and bringing it to their warehouse. And so they're like, okay. And so the party uh, goes to these nearby docks and is looking for something to steal. And they actually stumble upon a vestige of divergence. And
I don't know why that was so funny to me.
it's late.
Uh,
Okay, wait. Bring it in.
I don't know why that was so funny.
I'm about to have the giggles. Okay.
Yeah.
A vestige of divergence. And specifically, it is the circlet of barbed vision. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Which is this powerful, like, cursed artifact that is of Lolth, the Spider Queen. So they kind of stumble upon this in a ship that's full of just dead people, and they're like, "What's going on here?"
It's like
And
surely nothing bad could happen from this.
right, this is normal.
Dead bodies everywhere, but we're good.
So they
Level
take
2, but we got it.
yeah. So they take that and they make their way back to the warehouse, and they kind of have some second thoughts. Like, wait, should we really be giving this like clearly powerful artifact to these like bandits basically that we don't even know?
Right.
And they're like, yeah, let's not do that. So instead, they kind of ransack the warehouse themselves, and they find this big hoard stockpile of residuum. And Orym is familiar with this substance. He knows that, like, hey, this definitely isn't where it needs to be. Like, they're doing, like, they stole this. This is like a black market for this. And so he takes some and is like, I want to go talk to my people about this because they need to know. And so they're like, okay, well, let's get out of the city because now we've got some heat on our backs from betraying this organization. So sounds good to us. So the group leaves Iman and heads to the nearby Ashari outpost.
Yeah,
So
Fire
Orym,
Shari.
yes, thank you.
Yeah, the Fire Shari.
I think it's called the Flame Watch Post or something. That might be from World of Warcraft, but
So sounds very Fire Shari-esque.
yeah.
So go with it. Why not?
Yeah, okay. So they go there,
Yeah.
and actually, the residuum turns out to be small beans because as they arrive, there is this like enormous eruption from the ground, and like we're talking mountain size plateau just springs up from the earth, explicably.
Unexplained.
I can't.
Yeah.
Thanks. I can't do words today, I guess.
The first one was much smoother.
Yeah,
We'll just
it
go ahead
was.
and embrace it.
um, so they're like the people Orym, the people he's talking to is like, yo, what is this? Like, can y'all go check this out? And so the party goes and checks out this plateau, and they come to find out at the top of it there is this mysterious glyph in like a language none of them recognize or can understand, and it's like this burning hot sigil.
Mhm.
And so like, okay, this means nothing to us. So they return to the Ashari outpost, and the person there doesn't know either. And they're like, okay, you need to go talk to Sean Gilmore back in Amon. He is a rune child. He's smart. He's fabulous. Like, he can probably tell you more. And so they're like,
The two characteristics you need to know about someone.
exactly.
Smart and fabulous.
We could all only hope to be smart and fabulous.
Yeah. Anyway.
So they're like, all right, we go back to Amon. They go to Gilmore's Glorious Goods to talk to Gilmore. So they arrive, and unfortunately, Gilmore doesn't know what this is either. He can't quite make anything of it, and Gilmore knows a lot, so that's surprising. But he knows this is like some ancient language, and he actually knows where the party might be able to find out more about this. So Gilmore actually hires them. He's going to pay them to go investigate this further. And he sends them to a place called the Ruins of Cunira. And so the party's like, bet, we're on the way. So they get to traveling, get in a carriage, head out of the city. And while they're on the road, Fearne actually feels this like strange pull from the forest. Like there's something she is being drawn to in there. And so the whole party swerves off the road to go and investigate this. And they go deep into the forest and come to find this this doorway, this like a stone archway, just in the middle of the forest. And in this doorway, out steps a dark version of Fearne herself that is seemingly wearing the circlet of barbed vision. So basically, this big battle breaks out here, and during the battle, a mysterious fire genasi known as Fearne shows up and just starts aiding our party, and actually joins the party. And then they are successfully able to defeat the Dark Fearne, But toward the end of the combat, yet another group shows up. These elves from the nearby city of Singorn, led by a woman known as Murata. So after the kind of initial battle dies down, Murata and the elves are like, what's going on here? This is our forest. We protect this land. What are you doing? And they're like, yo, we just stumbled on this. This doorway's here. What's up with that? And the elves are like, we don't know anything about this doorway. So they kind of talk for a little bit, and during this, Murata actually uses some telepathy to probe into Opal's mind, and she kind of senses this power that Opal has in this moment, and is like intriguing.
Mm.
Um, but anyway, the elves go their separate way, and the party, including Fear now, get back on the road and are heading back toward the ruins. Um, but on their journey, they are coming close to the city of Byrodin, which is where Opal is from. So they decide to stop there for the night, and this is a great episode. They have a pageant, they have festivities. One of my favorite episodes, I think one of Blake's favorites as well.
Yeah, I think it's like episode 4 or 5.
Hmm.
Definitely, you don't need to watch any other episode in the sense of like to understand what's happening, but it's peak D&D. It's great role play. It's just a really fun episode.
It
It's
really is.
actually the first episode I think my wife watched all the way through, and she's
Oh,
basically
nice.
hooked on D&D now. So
Awesome. Yeah, and
yeah, it's a great episode.
there's some good inside jokes from that episode. I'm sure we'll talk about it in a little
Yeah.
bit. So they have their night of merriment and stuff in Byrodin, then get back on the road and head to the ruins. Once there, Fear is actually familiar with these ruins and kind of is guiding the party through this section. And she ultimately leads them to this hidden slash lost city of Nirdalpak, which is like this ancient civilization that has managed to like mask themselves from the outside world. And they they actually can translate this glyph for them. So they do just that, and they find out that the glyph means place of burning. So it's just quite literal, referring to the fact that like where this sigil was on the top of this plateau was very hot, and so they don't really learn anything about what this means or who did it, or they
Mhm.
basically learn nothing. So they're like,
But there's some conversation. Maybe it's later where they kind of there's some intuition around like something's trying to come through, like
right,
something's trying to force its way through. Which there's no resolution on that, by the way, but it might end up being important in campaign 3. But basically, something hot wants to come through.
yeah,
It was kind of the implication,
presumably from another plane of existence.
right? Yeah.
Um, so they they find out the meaning of the glyph, and they also are going to see if they can find out more. And Fururai says, "Okay, yeah, we got to go talk to Umeji, who is like one of a few like important leaders of this place." But they find out that Umeji is not here, and we come to find out that there has been like this very bad omen, this ominous something is coming. That the people of this city are like worried about and concerned about. And so Umeji has left to go south um, to speak to the Iron Authority about maybe preparing for this or just what's happening, maybe what they know. We're not, it's kind of left vague, but Umeji has gone south to kind of find out more about this. Um, and Fururai is like, oh well, dang, that's who I wanted you guys to talk to. So the party's like, okay, well, how about we just go south and see if we can find Umeji? And so they decide that that's what they're going to do. But while they're still in Nirdalpak, they actually get ambushed by Murata, who has returned because she wants to kidnap Opal. Because when she looked into her mind and she recognized that power inside of her, Murata decided that she wants that for herself. So
Mhm.
the party gets ambushed, but the party is able to successfully, rebuke the attack, and they get Opal so that Murata can't steal her, kidnap her. But Murata herself does escape. So the party kind of recovers after that, and then ends up heading south to look for Umeji, um, where once again they are attacked by Murata. And this is a bit later from the first attack. It's not like it was right back to back. But there's this big combat encounter, which basically serves as the climax of EXU, and it's a big set piece. A lot of kind of other things are happening, but the main point of it is final boss fight, right? And the party is able to defeat Murata, but not before Opal puts on the circlet of barbed vision, which, oh, I don't
we
remember.
we
Did
we
we?
forgot to mention
Okay, yeah.
that, yeah, like through, by the way, through like the course of this entire series, the circlet as an extension of Lolth is really tempting the party and is sort of trying to get the party through dreams, through nightmares, through visions of like skittering spiders. I mean, it's,
Yeah,
it ultimately is trying to, as Lolth describes it, find her champion, find her person who's going to put on this cursed object and become ultimately like seemingly an extension of her.
right.
And so this thing is happening. It's a lot like the One Ring of Saruman and Sauron, excuse me, I was doing Saruman. The One Ring of Sauron in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah,
That's really how you can envision the circlet. And so her finally putting on the and back when the series was airing, it was like, is someone going to put it on? Are they not going to put it on? Who's going to put it on? And so this moment of Opal ultimately putting it on to finish off Murata was in this climactic battle. It's also this very climactic moment for the
yeah,
series.
yep. And so Opal puts it on, kind of like transforms in a way, and they are able to defeat Murata. And that's essentially where EXU ends. After the combat, the party talks for a little bit and basically commits to continuing to travel together because they got to go find Umeji. Um, but that's really where it ends, and I mean, that's what you may have missed in
Yeah, that's what
EXU.
happened in EXU. Yeah. Great job, by the way.
Yeah, you too, my friend.
So we won't get into like the maybe like the implications of the show, like what happened necessarily in terms of like we know that CR3 picks up several months later. Is it a year later or
It's around a year later from where we just ended with the Murata fight.
and if you go back to that very first episode where Orym, Fearne, and Dorian are arriving in Marquette in Drusar in the airship, Matt even mentions that Opal eventually went back to Byrodin and Dariax decided to stay with her as a companion.
Mm-hmm.
And all the other conversations of, did they make it down to the Iron Authority? What happens? We really don't know. And we frankly, we don't know if that's a story that's ever going to get told, if there will ever be another season of EXU. But all that to say, we're not going to necessarily get into like the granular story points of EXU, but we do want to share from that what are some of the biggest takeaways that might be important for these characters specifically.
Right.
So I thought we could maybe just jump in and talk about the characters, the three characters that have continued in CR3. Does that
Yeah.
make sense to you?
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
So disclaimer, and again, so this is our second take. I can't remember if I said this already or not, but disclaimer, we're going to share background information as these three characters described it and revealed in EXU. But something that was specifically mentioned by Matt was that Orym and Fearne originally were sort of like beta test characters for what they envisioned for campaign 3, and so they
Right.
tried it out in EXU. So it bears mentioning that since EXU, some of these details might have changed. They may have totally retconned things entirely. We really have no idea, and so we'll share things as we know them, and we'll just go from there. So let me pull up my notes real quick
Yeah.
because I grabbed some notes myself that I didn't want to miss any details. Were you gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna vamp while you were looking for your notes, but I was just gonna say again, if you're more interested in those granular details or our theory crafting, we did discussion videos on every episode. So if that's your cup of tea, you could definitely check kind of the more nuanced, maybe not
Sure.
relevant details there.
Yeah. So let's start with Fearne,
Okay.
and I'll go ahead and tell you none of the. Again, these are the details as we know them. So Fearne is, I think, 110 years old.
Grandma.
But yeah, but I guess young for her.
Right.
And what we find out from Fearne, first of all, in campaign 3, she is a bit more chaotically neutral than what we see in EXU, in terms of like stealing and kind of poking and prodding for fun a little bit.
Yeah.
But the most important thing is the existence of Mister. She describes it in the most recent episode. She's like, yeah, that's my monkey. He seems to belch fire. You know, what's going on with this character? And in EXU, basically, whenever the actual actors were sort of play testing with one another to kind of vibe off each other, one of the scenarios they found themselves in terms of playtest content was this crater in Iman that was seemingly being overrun by fire elementals. And so the party went down into the crater. They battled some of these elementals. The way they sort of write this into the story of EXU is that after these events, the party has sort of like amnesia and wakes up thinking they've like just been celebrating and partying at the start of the first episode. But basically, down in this crater, Fearne feels sort of like this intuition, like this calling to her. And out of the ground, she pulls and like pops out. I kind of envision like bunny ears sticking out, and she pops out this small young fire elemental that, in almost like a familiar-esque type of way, sort of transfigures itself into a small monkey. And there are moments in EXU where Mister changes back into his fire elemental form, but that is essentially what Mister is. And beyond that, we don't necessarily really know his origin other than seemingly like a plane of fire, I guess.
Yeah.
So.
And one thing that they talked about, which you just said, but kind of reiterate, that Fearne like kind of reached in and used the power that was here to like she morphed the power into Mister, which the big plateau with the glyph on top of it, where basically we're told that like this is just a vast well of power waiting to be morphed, kind of in the same way that Fearne created Mister.
Yeah, like potential power. Yeah.
Yeah, and just for those of you that have seen C1 or know more about the history of Taldore, this crater that they're in is the scar of the Cinder King in Iman in the Cloud Top district. So that's kind of like just some nice flavor for where this is happening.
Which I was like, the who of the what? What is this?
Yeah,
So all I know is that someone attacked Iman is basically the most that I
that's
know.
right.
But yeah, and some other just interesting details about Fearne, by the way, that we've come to find out about her. We know that her parents left when she was young.
Mm-hmm.
They left in very ambiguous circumstances. It's never quite been answered why they left or where they went. But it's definitely a sort of pain point for Fearne, who seems to one day hope to be reunited with them. And ever since they left, she has been under the care of her grandmother, who has been that motherly figure in her life. She also reveals that her grandmother basically brought her to Iman, or rather brought her to that portal that Will mentioned, that she lived in the Feywild and was brought for some purpose, but it's really not clear what purpose. Even she can't really quite put her finger on it, other than there's a moment where the party kind of is like, hey, should we go back to the Feywild to see your family? And she's like, I kind of feel like my job isn't quite done here yet. There's also another detail with that where Dark Fearne, whenever she comes face to face with Dark Fearne basically says, our grandma wrote those letters, implying that Fearne has been receiving some kind of communication from her parents, but whether Dark Fearne's lying or not, it seems to be actually just the grandma writing those letters to sort of comfort her and, we're not on a farm somewhere. We're okay.
Right.
So, other details about Fearne you want to mention?
You pretty much hit it. I just want to or not reiterate, I guess, but let people know that didn't watch EXU, like Dark Fearne. Why are you guys just skipping over that? What's going on there? We don't know. There was this. She encountered the Dark Fearne through this portal, which is a portal to the Feywild. And they defeat her, and there's no other explanation given. We don't know if it was a trick, if it was
Right.
literally some sort form of Fearne from the future or something. We're really not sure. And yeah, like Blake said, the Dark Fearne implied that the grandmother may have been lying to her. And there's one other little detail that kind of plays into this is, like Blake said, Fearne was brought by her grandmother like to the plane of existence, the pri I forgot what it was called, but like Imon, the regular plane of existence. And this was her memory of this was actually like hidden from her. And Ashley actually
Right.
rolled like a natural 20 to remember this memory of like a walking for such a long time, but also an instant. And then the next
Mhm.
thing she knew was she was in the prime plane.
Yeah, and it's a really cool description of this false memory of like she describes seeing the memory of like walking basically for a long distance, and then it's like you see the memory and there's this little like curl of paper on the edge of the memory, and she sort of peels that away, and there's a new memory underneath of basically her grandmother leading her. So she is in Taldore for some reason that her grandmother has sent her. We're not sure what. And yeah, I really appreciate you pointing out we don't know anything else about Dark Fearne. And we also don't know what Matt's going to do with Ashley's character arc. If it's going to be an entirely new thing or if her parents, or specifically if Dark Fearne come back in some way, it might be kind of interesting.
Yeah, for
So
sure. And that's pretty much all on Fearne, but I could kind of use a little segue point here
yeah,
if you're cool
go
to
for
talk
it.
about Orym next.
Yeah, totally. Let's do it.
Yeah, so there were a few moments in EXU where it seemed like maybe Fearne and Orym might be kind of flirting with each other,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? So that's the whole segue. But just that so Orym and
And that's
Fearne
Orem.
might
So moving on to no, I'm just kidding.
might have some catch some feelings for each other. We'll see. There were just a few moments where he like positioned himself in front, like between Danger and Fearne. That happened on like
Yeah.
more than one occasion.
Yeah, which it bears mentioning that Orem's character. I know there were some comments that maybe Orem seemed a little bit more boring at the start of Critical Role. Not really the character you see in EXU. In EXU, he is definitely the level head of the group. He is
The dad.
incredibly bold and brave. Will just mentioned a moment where I think it's Dark Fern is sort of towering over Fern, and Orem, as the halfling, jumps in front and is kind of like, you have to go through me to get to her. He's an Arashari, which we already know. And really, the only important, interesting detail about him is there's something that's happened in his past that has we know that he has some connection to Keyleth and the Zephyr, where he's from, and the implication almost seems to be like I had some kind of bodyguard or general guard job that I no longer have anymore. And it's I can't remember the exact phrasing that implies that, but it's clear that he's kind of on his own now. He's doing his own thing now. And so it's interesting. I kind of wonder what's happened in the after moments of EXU that has brought him back to Keyleth and has now put him on the mission that we see in CR3, which, by the way, this mission not at all related to anything in EXU as far as we know.
Right.
It doesn't seem like it's a connected story. For those of you who are wondering about Ashad Breggio, the anger, all of that stuff, none of that was in EXU.
Oh yeah, and I guess we don't know when people might watch this. So for sake of context, Critical Role has had 4 episodes air. So
Right. And this is airing after a 5th episode, which we
okay,
have
right.
that airs tomorrow for us, but this is airing next week. So by the time this is live, yeah, we'll have had 5 episodes. So yeah, it may be that Opal is the big bad of CR3. We have no idea. People are like, "What's up with this video?" But
Um,
it'd be weird, but still.
but yeah, so as we know it now, Orym, is looking for Breggio. But yeah, so there was no mention of that in EXU. Maybe it's connected, but as far as we know, um, we're not sure. But
Yeah.
yeah, it seems like Orym was, if not like Keyleth's guard, just like a royal guard in Zephyr, because he mentions a few times like overhearing like different stuff. Like Orym like knows about Vox Machina and has heard about this place, that person, and he claims to have that knowledge from like being in the room when some of these things were happening, maybe, or even being talked about,
Mhm.
type of thing. Um, and we not to I don't know where you were going next, but one other thing I was gonna say is we also know that Orym had a significant other.
Mhm.
Um, we don't know their name or anything. We know it was I actually I don't know if I'm making this up now.
Well,
Was
this I'm glad you mentioned this because this is the next thing I
okay,
was gonna
yeah,
mention.
yeah, go ahead.
So this is kind of the only other big lore point about Orym, and it's when he's kind of taking this moment of solitude, and Abria, the DM, basically is sort of like creating this moment of introspection and says, "Are you willing to do what it takes for the party? Are you willing to go farther?"
Mm,
And Orm's basically, thinking about the group and thinking about how worthy it is to defend them, which is so in his nature. And he says, "For them, I will keep going." And then he says, "For him, I will," which many of us have seemed to imply that maybe this was a significant other, maybe a husband, maybe it could be anything. We don't know, but we've also wondered, is that tied to why he's no longer in Zephyra, why he doesn't seem to be a guard anymore? That's what I was going to mention. Was that
yeah, yeah,
on?
yeah. And
Okay.
what I was gonna say was was were they a guard? But I think I made that up. I don't think we ever were told that.
Yeah, we don't know anything beyond the "for him, I will." And the reason, by the way, that people have thought maybe it was a significant other is because of another small detail where later the party is skinny dipping and Orym adds the detail of he checks out Dariax's butt.
Yeah,
And so there's this little tiny flavor detail of like, oh, okay, well, maybe the he was methinks a Cupid is
yeah.
about or something. I don't know. I don't know what I'm quoting. It's like
I
my
liked it.
Tobias Funke best impressions. So, so
Uh,
anyway, anything else you want to share about Orym?
um, I don't think so. That was pretty much it.
Okay.
Yeah. So we don't know like potential significant other. We don't know that they are dead either.
Yeah,
It's been
right.
ambiguous. So like they might if that is a person, they may still be
Yeah.
alive even.
This could even be his dad, for all we know. I mean, we literally have I mean, we've Mephistoed real hard on this and like created like entire storylines. But it is important to mention that his dad actually was in the picture very early on, not in EXU, but he mentions that his dad was pretty much in and out of his life and
Right.
was moved on, wasn't around, and so that's a detail that might come up as well.
Hmm.
So. Speaking of dads and family, maybe we talk
Ooh.
about a fan favorite, our man Dorian, Dorian Storm,
Ooh.
stage name Dorian Storm. And this might be probably the most interesting character from EXU in the sense of like background and sort of intrigue.
Yeah.
And Dorian is an air genasi. There is a comment he makes about like the history of his people and sort of like when the flying cities fell. One of
Hmm.
our great commenters actually quoted it in one of our videos. I think the video where we talked about Broomstone, episode 3, I think is when it came up, maybe even episode 2. But aside from this, we know that he's very secretive of his background. In fact, throughout EXU, when he's asked, "Who are you? Where are you from?" He's very protective. Almost like, "Why are you guys asking me all these questions?"
Yeah.
Uh, Secretly, to, or rather, excuse me, 1-to-1 with Dariax, who's being played by Matt Mercer. Dariax is like, come on, you can trust me. And he basically makes up a story about being like a carnival person who's on the run. And Dariax is kind of the idiot of the party. He's like, "Oh, that's amazing." But then he tells Dariax a made up story about being part of royalty and how his brother sort of seems to have implied to have taken the crown, and some disruption to family, some bad blood between his brother has now caused him to be on the run. And he tells us as a story, but it seems to be heavily implied that there's significant truth to this, and why he's also seems to be traveling incognito It's mentioned in campaign 3 how he's has very nice clothing that he wears. And from EXU, he admits that Dorian Storm is a stage name and that his real name, again, we don't know if this will be the case for CR3, his real name is Bronte, and his mother called him Braun.
Run.
So,
Yeah, and I actually happened to find my old notes here, so just I can give you the exact story he told Dariax. Um, he told them that he came from a very famous line of trapeze artists and jugglers, the best in the land. And he said his father once juggled for a very famous king in the north. And this king liked it so much that he wanted to keep Dorian's father, like for himself. But Dorian's father wasn't about that, and so he left. He like ran away. And because of that, the king put a hit out on him. So if anyone, so Dorian explains that, so if anyone were to find me and find out that I was this guy's son, like they'd be after me too. And so we all like he was telling this as kind of, like a just to mess with Dariax, as Blake mentioned, but there definitely seems to be truth to that. So we're
right.
wondering if like, you know, the story is the same, but the details are different. You know, names have been
Right.
changed, locations have been changed.
Yeah. Well, and he does tell a second story at some point that mentions a brother or some
Yeah,
kind of,
yeah.
which adds more context, I think, to it too.
Yeah, he does. And there does seem to be
So,
kind of like maybe a slightly adversarial relationship with the brother.
mhm.
Maybe not like anything
Yeah.
ominous, maybe just as normal, you fight with your siblings type of thing.
Right.
Um, but yeah, the impression I was left with was that Dorian is not that he's like a prince, but he is of like a high noble
Yeah.
bloodline.
Right.
And, for whatever reason, people are out to get his family where he's from. So he's been, adopted this stage name of Dorian Storm. And
Mhm.
even after he trusts the party enough to tell them that his real name is Bronte, he still says, "But call me Dorian." So I think he like maybe it's because he doesn't trust them enough yet. But to me, I took that as he's kind of happy with where he is now and is maybe trying to leave that
Right.
behind,
Yeah.
not just necessarily like run away from
Mhm.
it, until whatever.
And we do find out in the first episode of CR3 that he's actually been to Marquette before. It's a large portion of the dialogue where he's sort of describing, the Spire by Fire, where they can sleep. Hey, be careful around here. So that was a little bit more to his story. And then the other kind of interesting tidbits, you've those of you who've been watching CR3, you've probably noticed how there's a bit of a bromance between Dorian and Orym, where they're just best friends. They're just you can tell they've been through a lot together. Dorian has this great line in CR3 where he says, there's no debts between us.
Yes.
And that's that you may have watched that and thought like, oh wow, they're really good friends. But actually in EXU, there was quite a bit of tension between these two characters. And the
Hmm.
reason for that is because we talked about the circlet of barbed vision, that artifact of Lolth's that's sort of tempting and probing at the party. Well, Dorian was the one who was probably most manipulated, heavily impressioned by Lolth to put on the crown, to the point where even Abria had his alignment actually shift slightly in the campaign.
Yeah.
And there's even a moment where he offers to carry the crown in his backpack, and Orym does not trust him at all. And the party almost goes to blows where Orym, you know, I envision sort of hand on a sword, on the pommel of a sword is basically like, hey, put that crown down, give it back to Dariax, who's been carrying it, or we're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
And so there was real tension in that. Is Dorian going to put on the crown? Is he not going to put on the crown? Is he trustworthy? Is he not? Why, is he tempted because of his backstory? We don't really know.
Right.
And so it's nice now in CR3 seeing how they are almost like brothers.
Yeah.
It's a nice throwback to resolving that conflict they had at EXU.
Yeah. Really great to see that bond strengthen. And they were like friends and like and
Right.
everything,
Yeah.
even at
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
end of
Yeah. Yeah.
EXU, but just the
Right.
relationship has obviously deepened and evolved. And which another like bullet point in that, which I liked, was in I guess it was 2 episodes ago. When Bertrand and Imogen go chase after Danis, Dorian's like, no, I'm not leaving Orym. Like, I got to stay here.
Right.
So they're just, homies, which
Yeah, they're great dudes.
the bromance, though, and this isn't really relevant, at least we don't think, to C3, but the bromance of
Oh, yeah.
EXU was Dorian and Dariax, Matt's character. And
Right.
I
That's
hope
true.
we see Dariax in C3.
Yeah, it'd be great. The only other thing I can think about is people who've been like, "What's up with the pies? Like, why do we keep hearing pie jokes?
Yeah.
What's happening?" It's been mentioned a few times where Dorian sort of pokes fun at Orym loving pies. The episode that we just saw in CR3 with the Shadow Baker, Orym asks, "Do you have any pies?" and gets belittled, and how dare you ask me that? So the story behind the pies is basically this: when they're in by Roden, they're sort of having their last night of celebration before continuing on their journey, and it is this very warm southern hospitality esque type of town. And the mayor of the town basically is talking about all the pies and all the foods that are being made for this pageant that's happening in the town. That happens once a year. And Orm's like, "Oh, I've never had a pie before." And she's like, "You've never had pie?" And basically walks him along. And he has so much pie that he basically is sick from it. And but in a weird, twisted way, ends up kind of enjoying it. And so that it wasn't really that big of a story point, but it's come up a few times now
Yeah.
as kind of a funny throwback. So that's where the story of the pies come from.
Yeah.
So other Easter eggs that we've seen so far, by the way.
I'm trying to think. I think we covered most of it. Yeah, I'm sure there is, but not that I can think of.
We'll see. And maybe as we probably won't do another version of this video in the sense of like, even if maybe, I guess, unless like major characters came back from EXU, maybe we would.
Yeah.
But we might like pin in the comments other Easter eggs that maybe pop up along the way for people who want to know what that's from. Maybe we'll put it in the comments or something, or update this video in some way. But definitely, if we missed anything, let us know. Especially if there's not just Easter eggs, but key story points from EXU that you think might show up again in CR3 and might be worth mentioning. Definitely let us know, because we want to make sure that we're on top of it.
Yeah, please do. And yeah, like, you post in the comments things we missed or anything, we'll pin that so people that watch this in the future can see it. But yeah, I since we're wrapping up here, I just want to go ahead and plug again that if you're new to Blake and I, we do an episode of this podcast every week. Critical Role doesn't necessarily air every week, but for every episode of Critical Role, Blake and I will be talking about it. We'll do a recap and then we'll do a discussion, which you can find all of that on our channel. So we would love to engage with you on this. Love to talk theory, craft, deep dive. Yeah, so we're in it for the long ride. So we hope you are with us.
Yeah, don't be a stranger. We have so many people who comment on the channel, and that's really fun for us. Is
it really is.
Even when we read like the same comment like 8 times, it's like actually Bertrand is from the one shot with Search for Grog, which we love all that. It's really great. Even repeat comments, so don't hesitate. And also, by the time this is aired, you can actually find the podcast now, literally as a podcast, on any platform, Spotify, iTunes, you name it, it's on there. And you don't need to do anything to help us with that podcast other than if you like that kind of audio formats, just go check it out and we'll be there.
Yeah.
So, all right, thumbnail. What are we doing?
Oh, I don't know. I forgot we had to do a thumbnail.
Yeah, we all get a
I don't know why I did. Not like this is any
envision
different.
like kind of us thinking like, or like kind of like, charting out like what happened or something.
Okay, I like that. I'm gonna like be writing on this post-it note.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
All
why
right.
not? Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Like, what a weird channel.
That's us.
All right.
Vestige
we did
of
it.
Divergence or whatever I said.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for checking us out. We're also on Twitter at the Pixelists. And hey, we so appreciate it. Hope you guys had a great holiday, and we'll be back next week. We'll see you.
Bye, y'all.